Hello, my name is Tony. I've realised I've been harder on McQ in the past than I really needed to be. Or have I? Yeah, fair cop. I still stand by some of the accusations I've levelled at it previously. That it lacks energy, that it has a visibly overaged star in an age-inappropriate role, that the direction is less than dynamic, that it jogs along when it should be sprinting round the track, that the script is listless, it's uneven, that... But okay, enough already. Initially I found it to be a hard watch. You got a major screen hero of mine struggling to keep up with the new breed, to remain relevant, when it was really too late in the day. In fact, I found it a bit sad, to be honest. Brannigan, made a year or so later, was more on target. It was a lighter, jokier, somehow more palatable urban fantasy because it didn't take itself so bloody seriously. It knew it was absurd. Easier to swallow and digest, disposable entertainment. I suppose McQ marked the beginning of the end of something for me, and I suppose it was something I didn't much like, that feeling of impending loss. John Wayne was my favourite screen actor when I was a kid, and it was a bit depressing to see him lumbering around arthritically in a modern police thriller whilst everything around him seemed to shift so much faster, like he was out of sync with the world, falling out of step, slipping out of time. Wayne could use his advance in years to good effect in movies like True Grit, The Cowboys, Big Jake, and ultimately The Shootist. But at age 66 when McQ was made, it might have been better if he'd played the character as a retired cop and private dick from the outset, rather than an active police detective. But then if the aim is to compete with the kids on their own turf, then you're going to try and emulate them, which I'm afraid is a hide into nowhere. Along with every Tom, Dick and Dirty Harry in Hollywood, Wayne had turned down the chance to be in Don Siegel's landmark cop thriller in '71, and the Duke regretted his decision, hindsight being a beautiful thing, but a functionally useless one in this instance. Seeing the impact Dirty Harry had on Eastwood's career and how it influenced mainstream cinema in general, the big guy thought he'd get himself some of that action. He didn't though, he made McQ instead. How'd that work out? Wayne is Lon McQ, a Seattle police detective, a standard maverick rule-bender type with a low tolerance for authority and things like constitutional rights. When the film kicks off, we see McQ's long-term partner Boyle executing two patrolmen with a silent pistol in the early hours of the morning. An unidentified collaborator in the killings then blasts Boyle in the back with a shotgun and drives off. McQ lives on a boat moored in a marina, sure, where else? He's that sort of maverick outsider type, unconventional, you dig? No house or apartment building for him, no sir. He needs the freedom of the ocean, or a static berth in a dock. A phone call awakens him and alerts him to the shootings of Boyle and the deaths of the two beat cops. As he's about to leave for work, he chases off a lowlife trying to boost his car, a dark green Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. Before you know it, some chancer tries to shoot him. Taking cover behind some trash cans, he emerges returning fire, with a pistol that looks and sounds suspiciously like the Magnum used in that Dirty Harry movie from a couple of years ago. He drills the guy from fucking miles away as he tries to flee the scene. McQ recognises the corpse as belonging to a professional hitman. It sure looks like there's some heavy shit going down, man. What the hell could it be? He goes to the hospital and meets with Boyle's wife, Lois, Diana Mulder. Boyle isn't dead yet, but it won't be long before he fails to regain consciousness and the heart monitor flatlines. McQ wants the case, but his superior, Captain Costerman, Eddie Albert, who doesn't hold with McQ's maverick methods, gives him an unconditional refusal. Frank Toms, Clu Gulager, Costerman's second in command, is more sympathetic and stands up for McQ, which ought to set alarm bells ringing. Always suspect the guy who seems to be on your side as a rule of thumb in these sorts of movies. McQ isn't the type to take no for an answer, and he's convinced it's something to do with mob boss Manny Santiago Alateri. So much so he begins a rogue surveillance operation, follows Santiago to a restaurant, beats him insensible in the bogs, then leaves him lying in a urinal for his colleagues to find after informing them he's taken a shower. This is exactly the sort of stealthy, low-key, softly police work such a delicate situation requires. In case you missed it, McQ isn't big on subtlety. Due to this indiscretion, Costerman refers McQ to internal affairs with intent to suspend him. McQ decides to resign and hand over his badge and gun. His next move is to enter partnership with his private dick pal Pinky, David Huddleston, so he can continue his investigation on behalf of his client, which is actually himself. himself. To buy into this business, he borrows money from his ex-wife and her husband, with whom he is on pretty cordial terms. We get to meet McQ's teenage daughter, Ginger. If I don't say it now, I'll have to say it later. Who the fuck calls their kid Ginger? It's not even a nickname here, it's a fucking name. Even Ginger Rogers' real name wasn't Ginger, it was Catherine. I mean, why not christen her Chlamydia or Syphilis or Fanny? Actually, Fanny would be an improvement. I mean, come on, Ginger, for fuck's sake. McQ uses some of the money to buy information from his former snitch, the Superfly pimp Rosie, Roger E. Mosley. What's wrong with Rosie? Even that's better than Ginger. Then he gets more information from Boyle's snitch, Myra Colleen Dewhurst, an aging former hooker and junkie. McQ doesn't give her money. Oh no, that would be amoral. He gives her some cocaine instead, then fucks her. There, that's much better. Far more acceptable. Gotta have some standards. What it comes down to is a haul of drugs confiscated by the police department is going to be burned by representatives of the State Attorney General's office at a secret location. But the location ain't so secret, and the stash is going to be heisted before it's destroyed. McQ follows the stash and gives chase when the Crims boost it and make their getaway in a laundry truck. He loses the truck and gets hauled in by Costerman, which results in his also losing his private dick status and having to hand over his firearm as a punishment for withholding information which Costerman wouldn't have listened to anyway because he never listens to anything McQ has to say. Undaunted, McQ nips along to his local gun store to get another firearm. As he's a regular, the owner invites him into the back room to try out a brand new Ingram McQ-10 9mm machine pistol with bonus oversized silencer. This baby unleashes 20 rounds per second. McQ unloads on a trash can full of water. Impressive. He borrows it just in case it might come in handy. Well, you never know. Breaking into Santiago's warehouse to locate the missing drugs, McQ finds the mobster and his goons waiting for him. Santiago is pissed because the drugs his men stole turned out to be powdered sugar. The actual drugs, he reasons, have been lifted by someone in the police. He gives McQ a beating as payback for his ignominious toilet assault. Couldn't have been much of a beating though, because McQ comes through it pretty much unscathed. Myra doesn't come through things unscathed. She opens her door to be confronted by some heavy wearing a stocking on his head. He blows her away. Next, two huge lorries try to crush McQ's Pontiac Firebird in an alley. Unfortunately for McQ, he's in it at the time. Surviving this attempt to make him one with his ride, the wily cop figures it was not a serious attempt on his life. Not sure I'd reach the same conclusion if two juggernauts smashed themselves deliberately into my car whilst I was sat inside it, but then I'm not a highly decorated police detective, so what do I know? No, McQ thinks the aim was to separate him from his car. I know, just go with it. See, Boyle, remember him, his ex-partner, shotgun blast to the spine, Lois's husband, borrowed McQ's car just recently. Yeah, don't worry, you have been paying attention, it just wasn't mentioned before. Now, if Boyle was dirty, then maybe he and his dirty cop compadres stashed the real drugs in the trunk of McQ's vehicle. You know, in that trunk he never goes in, except at the very start of the film to get his spare gun and a cassette recorder. Yeah, that trunk. So his wrecked car is now in the police impound lot. Breaking in, McQ finds traces of dope in what's left of the trunk. Someone on the force has been there before him and removed all the candy. McQ hotwires a squad car and escapes just as Costerman sends in the dogs and armed police to root him out. Cue brief car chase. McQ goes to see Lois, who is just about to leave with some heavy-looking suitcases to go and stay with her parents. McQ tags along. He notes they're being followed. He tells Lois that he knows her husband was dirty, that he was a party to the theft of the drugs, and that Lois is in it up to her neck, because she's got the drugs stashed in one of her suitcases. She crumbles and admits it, but only because McQ starts lobbing suitcases out the window. Pulling off the road onto a stretch of beach, the driver of the car following opens fire on McQ. McQ kills the driver, only to discover it's his old friend Tom's. See, what did I tell you? Two more cars arrive full of Manny Santiago in his hoods. There's a climactic car chase and shootout over a very long stretch of coastline, during which the Ingram McQ-10 machine pistol comes in very handy, just like McQ thought it would. He's almost a prophet. The film ends with everyone dead apart from Lois and McQ. Lois is taken into custody. Costerman offers McQ his badge back, and they head off for a drink in a nearby surfer bar. And that's about it. Story-wise, that is. Thing about McQ is, it isn't all bad. Some of it isn't all that great, some of it isn't all that good even, and some of it is, well, pretty fucking crap, but I still find it watchable and in some ways entertaining. The final impression is of a mid-70s made-for-TV movie with a bigger budget and a more than reasonable level of talented input and star quality. The screenplay by Lawrence Roman, who was responsible for adapting Ira Levin's psycho thriller A Kiss Before Dying in 1956 with some narrative skill and flair, originally wrote it as a vehicle for Steve McQueen, which gives the titular character's surname a playful perspective, I guess. It was heavily rewritten to make it more suitable for Wayne. Is this therefore what makes it feel somewhat forced and contrived? It feels for me like something off the peg that's been reformatted, and it's an uneasy fit. John Wayne has never been anything less than a commanding and watchable screen presence, and he's still got that natural magnetism and superstar aura going on here, but he looks awkward and out of place, like he's in the wrong clothes, in the wrong landscape, and in the wrong historical period. That this is an urban western is a given, but the Duke looks uncomfortable and incongruous. The transition from cowboy to cop isn't seamless, and the script and dialogue does very little to consolidate that crossover. His age contributes adversely to a less than convincing performance, but then some of the lines wouldn't set well with the most contemporary of 70s performers.
A heist team, Rosie, you're shining me on.
And I'm going to mention some of those character names again. Pinky, Rosie, and Ginger. Sound like characters from a Saturday morning kids show. There is no irony attached, so don't strain yourself looking for any. Wayne is surrounded by good solid character actors, the likes of Eddie Albert, Clu Gulager, Diana Mulder, David Huddleston, and Colleen Dewhurst. But they do serve to reinforce that made-for-TV movie vibe, as they were familiar faces in that medium at the time. Roger E. Mosley is great fun as Rosie, despite the stupid name, and you couldn't get a much more fitting actor than Al Lettieri to play a menacing mob boss. He'd perfected such roles in The Godfather, The Getaway, The Don Is Dead, and Mr. Majestic. Class act, that Al. Director John Sturges was mostly at home with westerns and war movies. This was his only film with Wayne. When you have a resume including Gunfight at the OK Corral, The Magnificent Seven, and The Great Escape, your forte is pretty damn clear. He'd made some cool modern action thrillers like The Satan Bug and Ice Station Zebra, but by the time of McQ had seemingly lost some of his juice. McQ just looks and feels flat and stilted. Like the mechanics work okay, but are seriously underpowered. It's by the numbers, going through the motions. Unlike Dirty Harry, it never comes alive and grips you by the throat like a good action thriller should. Sort of wakes up every so often and gives your lapel a little shake before dropping off again. The start is promising, deserted early morning city streets, Boyle whacking the two beat cops, then getting shotgunned and left for dead. That does get the audience's attention. Harry Stradlin's cinematography is great in those scenes and in the final beach chase, but elsewhere it has that made-for-TV look. It's an odd combination of the cool and inspired and the resolutely pedestrian. Then there's Elmer, the Magnificent Seven Bernstein score, which resembles a fattened up jazz dub of a western theme and leaves a lasting impression. Good stuff. The car chases are decent enough, but don't really set the pulse racing, except for the climactic coastline rumble, which is the standout set piece and a fairly satisfying payoff. But in the end, it's too little too late. McQ was released the same year as Eastwood's second Harry Callahan flick Magnum Force, and suffers by comparison. Magnum Force was fast, brutal, violent, sharp, slicker than oil, and packed a mean punch or six. It had some killer lines, tight scripting by John Milius, crunching action, and a powerful imaginative storyline about a secret vigilante death squad operating within the police force. Modern and vital for the time. McQ looked weary and ponderous when placed beside it. What's the solution then? Well, don't compare it with the competition, whatever else was around, and then it comes off a lot better. Taken in isolation, it's a low to moderate energy police action thriller with one of the all-time Hollywood greats in the lead. It's undemanding fare, requiring a little more suspension of disbelief than usual. So if accepted for what it is, flaws included, then it's not the least rewarding thing you could burn time on. And as for the Duke, he wasn't done yet. He would take on his own legend as an actor within the rich tapestry of cinematic Western mythology and physically failing human being in Don Siegel's The Shootist in 1976, possibly the most revealing and relevant last movie of any screen actor. He would literally perform his own epitaph, and perform it near perfectly. Thank you for your time and attention. As always, it is appreciated and valued. If you want to, hit like or don't like. Leave a comment about anything that takes your fancy. Suggest potential future content if you have something in mind. I might even get round to it, you never know. And maybe even subscribe to the channel. I'm moving on to the next one, quick as I can. Quicker than McQ anyway.